They told us he left in the night to bring last rites to a dying village, but the blood-stained journal found hidden behind a hollow stone in the seminary chapel says otherwise. It says his name was Michael Brennan, and that he never made it out of Sacred Heart alive. You were never meant to hear this. Not from the Vatican, not from your history teacher, and certainly not from any so-called official archive. This is the story of the 10 priests who vanished between 1847 and 1862 from what was once the crown jewel of Catholic education in the American Midwest. It was a place designed to mold young men into instruments of God. Instead, it became a hunting ground run by men who weren't priests at all, but predators in collars. And they were very, very good at hiding what they did. There is no historical record of their crimes, at least not one they ever intended you to find, but someone did. In 1971, a construction worker named Ray Morley was repairing the subfloor beneath the Sacred Heart Chapel when his boot cracked through a rotted plank. Beneath it, a stone-lined cavity filled with crumbling books, sealed letters, and bones. Real human bones. Femurs wrapped in faded cassocks, skull fragments with cracked crowns and teeth shattered inward. Among them, a signet ring from the Archdiocese of Chicago and a priest's journal, pages soaked with ink, blood, and terror. That journal, authenticated by forensic historians and dated to 1848, describes events no man should have witnessed, much less survived. It detailed a seminary run by 3 men who were not clergy, not saints, not even scholars, but escaped convicts from Ireland who murdered the original staff and assumed their identities using forged letters from long-dead bishops. Let that sink in. The Catholic Church, desperate for American-born priests during a time of religious warfare, handed full authority of its most prestigious training ground to 3 men whose souls were already damned, and they used that power like a scalpel. This was not simple abuse. This was a machine fueled by bodies, lies, and a business far more profitable than salvation. Michael Brennan wasn't the first. He was just the first to leave behind a voice. What happened inside those walls, what really happened, was sealed by the Vatican for over a century and a half. Why? Because the men who ran Sacred Heart didn't just kill, they trafficked. They manipulated, they sold young priests into servitude, exile, and death, all under the mask of piety and divine obedience. And the scariest part? Some of those buyers weren't foreign. Some were men of wealth and influence from right here in the United States. Men who spoke Latin in public and filth in private. Men who believed God could be bought. Tonight, I'm going to take you through the 10 disappearances, one by one, and with each step we will descend deeper into the forgotten chambers of American faith, a place where light never truly reached, and silence was more valuable than truth. But I warn you, once you hear this story, you can't unhear it. You can't return to the illusions you lived in before. This isn't a documentary, this is a ritual. And it begins now. He was the first, the one they claimed simply left for contemplation. No body, no letter, just gone. Brother Elias Crow wasn't like the others at Sacred Heart. He was older, 38, a Civil War veteran who'd renounced violence and joined the seminary to atone for what he called God's silence on the battlefield. He was quiet, respected, but not trusted, not by the men in charge. Because Brother Elias kept records, private ones, a habit from his time as a Union intelligence officer. Every day he logged behavior, conversations, changes in schedules. He noticed things, like how students began vanishing from dormitory rosters, like how Father Kavanagh, one of the 3 imposters, would take late-night wagon trips westward, always returning empty and alone. Like the screaming. In his journal, later found behind a wall panel in the refectory, Brother Elias wrote, "Something is wrong. The priests, they do not eat with us, they do not pray. They disappear for days at a time and return smelling of sweat and lie. And the cellar, I heard what sounded like iron dragging across stone. I heard a boy crying. But when I descended, there was no boy, only cold." That entry was dated October 11th, 1847. By October 14th, Elias Crow had vanished. Seminary records list his status as transferred to the Order of the Discalced Carmelites, Denver. But there was no Denver monastery at the time. None. It didn't exist. And here's where things get darker. That same week, an undertaker in nearby LaSalle County recorded a strange order, a coffin shipped west with no death certificate, no parish name, and no recipient. The coffin was paid for in cash, gold coins minted in Ireland in 1833, never circulated in the US. Someone was burying something, or someone, without ever admitting there'd been a death. And Elias Crow wasn't the only one. Within 6 months, 2 more priests vanished. Yet, one connected by a single thread. They'd questioned the seminary's finances. They'd followed Father Kavanaugh at night. They'd gotten too close to whatever he was doing beneath the chapel's foundation. When the church investigated, it didn't. Why? Because that chapel was paid for not by the church, but by a mysterious donor named John Blackthorne. A man with no birth record, no death certificate, and no traceable origin. He funded the seminary in full. A ghost. And here's the real kicker. Michael Brennan's journal, found over a century later, mentions Blackthorne not once, not twice, but 17 times. In every reference, he is not described as a man, but as something else. Blackthorne's eyes were like ink. Not black, not human, but wet, like something spilled from the well below. That's not poetic. That's a man describing a presence, a being, something that did not belong in any church, much less one built on sacred soil. So ask yourself, who was John Blackthorne? Why did 3 fugitives from Ireland murder their way into power, and what were they feeding in the cellar beneath Sacred Heart? This is not myth. This is documented, hidden, and buried history, and we are not done yet. Next, the boy who burned from the inside out, the letter sealed in wax with no sender, and the priest who confessed, before being buried alive. Are you still with me? Good, because it only gets worse from here. What happened beneath Sacred Heart wasn't just murder, it wasn't madness, it was ritual. The cellar, originally a wine vault, had been sealed off by the Jesuits who founded the site in 1835. Why? Because they said something lived below the limestone. A seam of rock cracked during construction, and from it, according to records now lost from the archdiocesan archives, came a warm wind and the smell of burnt honey and rotted teeth. They sealed it, prayed over it, left it alone. But when Fathers Kavanaugh, Doyle, and Lynch took over, they reopened it. Why? Because they were searching for the lament child, a figure whispered about in Irish pagan folklore, a creature said to be born of smoke and suffering, summoned by betrayal and sustained by blood. Not myth. A real entity. A force. How do we know? Because on March 9, 1848, a letter arrived at the seminary, sealed in red wax. No return address. Just one line on the envelope. He is ready. Inside, a single sheet of vellum. Bury him in ash, bind his hands in faithless scripture. When the breath stops, wait. When it returns, do not look away. That same night, a student, 14-year-old Thomas Grady, was taken from his bed and never seen again. The next morning, the walls of the cellar were blackened, not scorched, blackened, as if the color had been sucked into the stone itself. The seminary's kitchen chimney, over 40 feet away, belched smoke for 3 straight days. No fire was reported, no wood was burned, and yet the smoke never stopped. When one of the lay brothers, Father Rupert Leahy, tried to investigate, he went down with a lantern. What he saw was recorded in his final sermon. There were footprints on the ceiling, small ones, and a sound like a lamb choking. I saw him, the Grady boy. But his eyes were gone. Smoke poured from his mouth. I called to him. He opened his lips and whispered, "It's warm inside." Father Leahy tried to seal the cellar again. He begged the diocese to shut down the seminary. 1 week later, he was found dead inside the chapel's confessional. His lungs were full of soot. His hands were blistered black. The confession door had been nailed shut from the inside. And what about Thomas Grady? 3 years later, a letter arrived in Boston. No return address. Inside, a piece of human skin, tanned like parchment. On it, burned in acid, were 6 words: "I am not Thomas, I am hollow." His parents were never told. The seminary kept operating, and below the floorboards, the child remained. But there's one more thing. In 1972, when the site was being prepped for demolition, a surveyor's photo captured something strange: a blackened circle beneath the chapel floor, perfectly round, 12 feet across. It hadn't been there before. The stone was smooth, melted, almost glass. In the center, etched into the ground in Latin, "Et vocavit ex umbris," and he called it from the shadows. Who called it? Why? And what was it? That's what our next section will uncover: the confession of Father Lynch, the only priest who lived long enough to speak. What he said before they buried him, and why his grave was dug twice as deep to make sure he couldn't climb out. If you hear this, I failed, and it still walks. That's the voice of Father Elias Lynch, recorded in 1913 on a wax cylinder found sealed inside a plaster wall behind the old seminary altar. His voice had never been heard publicly, until now. Lynch was the last of the 3 priests who reopened the cellar in 1848. Unlike the others, he didn't die screaming or disappear into the stone. He went quiet. He lived. And then he confessed. But not to the church, to something else. In the audio, he says he was chosen, not by the seminary, not by the bishop, but by a figure he only refers to as the man in the red stole. He claims this man visited him in dreams, in mirrors, and eventually in the flesh. Here's what he said. He had no eyes, just indentations where the skin curved inward, as if his gaze had been burned shut from seeing too much. He smelled of rain and sulfur. He told me, "The boy is not a boy, he is the key. Feed him sorrow, feed him silence, let him be opened." What does that mean? Lynch claimed that the rituals they performed weren't meant to summon the child. They were meant to break it open, like a vessel, so that something older could come through. He called it the hollowing. We thought we were conjuring a servant, but we were carving a door. Lynch described how the other priests were consumed, first in body, then in soul. One by one they became vessels themselves. He said Father Kavanaugh stopped speaking entirely and would simply stand in the chapel for hours, staring at the cross and laughing. Father Doyle began writing in languages he did not know, carving them into his own skin, mumbling about the Black Birth. Lynch was spared. Why? Because, he said, he loved the boy. He couldn't go through with it. He hid Thomas Grady's rosary under the floorboards, refused to participate in the final rite, and for that, the others turned on him. Tut. Hay sealed me in the vestry. No food, no light, just voices, scratching, breathing. I survived for 7 days on consecrated wine and spiders, and when they came to open the door, it wasn't them. It was the child, and he wept. Father Lynch was later found wandering the woods barefoot, clutching the rosary, muttering prayers that didn't exist. He was institutionalized for 34 years. Before he died, he made a request: that his grave be lined with salt, that his casket be made of iron, and that he be buried facing downward. Why? Because he feared he would speak again and draw the child back from the dark. But here's where it gets worse. In 1989, that grave was exhumed by accident during a land survey. The coffin was split, the salt was gone, and etched into the inside lid of the iron casket, with bloody fingernails, were the words, "He walks in my mouth." The body was never recovered, and now strange sightings around the ruins, black smoke in the treetops, a child's voice heard during thunderstorms. The local power grid has to be reset monthly due to unexplained surges, and last year, a group of ghost hunters dared to enter the foundation at night. Only one came back. Her hair turned white, her tongue was gone. She scratched 3 words into the car door with a broken key: "He found me." In 1994, a brown envelope was anonymously delivered to Dr. Marcella Reddick, a theologian at Georgetown. No return address, No fingerprints. Inside were 92 pages of sealed Vatican communiques, most marked Archivum Secretum Apostolicum Vaticanum, the Pope's private archive. These were not just forgotten memos, these were suppression orders. One in particular, dated April 12, 1852, is chilling. The site in Mount Hebron is to be closed under edict of silence. All relics, records, and remnants are to be sealed in lead and buried. The child is not to be spoken of again, not in ink, not in breath. Any breach will be met with excommunication and erasure. Erasure. Not just removal from the priesthood, but obliteration from the Church's memory. They weren't just covering up abuse, they were covering up a cosmic mistake, something they called the aberration of flesh. Another document penned by Cardinal Pietro Alfani, an exorcist known for his brutal methods, details the burning of a second seminary in southern Spain after similar rituals began showing signs of what he called childlike manifestations without origin or soul. He wrote, "They appear docile at first, but they are echoes, reflections without mirrors, and once spoken to, they become aware. And then, they imitate. Badly." Alfani warned that these things, these children, can't be baptized, can't be banished, because they were never human to begin with. And here's where it all converges. In 1978, an American bishop visited the ruins of Mount Hebron Seminary during a private retreat. His name was Bishop Ernest Mallory. 4 weeks later, he suffered a total psychotic break. When police arrived at his estate, they found his study walls covered in charcoal sketches of the same boy's face, every single one smiling, except for one. That one was weeping, and written beneath it, in Mallory's own blood, "We didn't bury him deep enough." But perhaps the most damning evidence came in a handwritten note found folded between 2 pages of the Vatican's internal exorcism codex. No signature, no date, just 8 words. He was never missing, only waiting, watching. And this part, the codex it was hidden in, it's only used after an exorcism fails. A monastery in rural Moldova. A group of Jesuit archivists is restoring damaged parchment when one of them, Father Luca, discovers a marginal note written in wax pencil. "Check the well behind the wall." They find it, bricked over, hidden behind false stone. When they break through, they uncover a sealed reliquary, wrapped in black linen and marked with a child's footprint burned into iron. Inside, not bones, not relics, just a single photograph, faded, torn, mid-20th century. A class of Catholic schoolboys posing for a portrait. But in the back row, right edge, almost out of frame, a boy no one remembers. No name, no records. Same haircut, same expression, same eyes. Same as the boy from 1857. Same as the sketch from Bishop Mallory's wall. Same as the child seen by Dr. Elsie Sanger in 1989, who said the boy whispered in her ear in perfect Latin, "Do not grieve, I am still learning to be you." But the final thread, the one that pulls it all together, a declassified CIA memo from 1964 titled Project Acor, redacted almost entirely except for one line. Subject is non-responsive to pain. Subject is mimicking human behavior with increasing accuracy. Recommend containment or termination before Easter. This memo was found in the same facility where the Vatican once conducted joint experiments with the OSS, years before the CIA ever officially existed. And the address? Mount Hebron, Pennsylvania. Right where the seminary once stood. Right where the boy was last seen. So we're left with this. Was he a possession, a clone, a demonic echo, or something far older? An intelligence wrapped in the shell of a child, mimicking us for centuries, biding its time. And if he's still out there, what happens when he stops pretending? Long silence, then the sound of a child breathing. One whisper, soft, just beneath the mix. Tag, you're it. You look at old photographs now, differently. That 3rd grade class picture, the church camp photo, always someone near the edge, blurred, unlabeled, looking straight at the camera when no one else is. You rewind stories your grandfather told, the one about the boy who survived the fire but never spoke again, the boy who didn't sleep, didn't blink, didn't age, And maybe it's nothing. Maybe this is all just myth and madness stitched together by paranoid minds and broken hearts. But one question lingers like smoke. What if he's not looking for us anymore? What if he's waiting for us to become him? Because if mimicry is the first stage, what comes after? Pause. Distant static. Sound slows. Like tape warping. You want to look away. You want to forget. But he's always there. Just out of focus. Just behind the glass. A little boy. Watching. Learning. Becoming.